That is good. And now it will be Dr. Vicky Robertson, who is right here, poised. Kia ora, tēnā koe, haramai. Thank you.
Ka tangi te titi, ka tangi te kaka. Ka tangi hoki aho. No mai haere mai ki te hui hui nei. No mai haere mai ki te kaupapa nei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Good afternoon. I hear you've had a great day. I had a brief that said something like, biosecurity is a losing battle. So I'll depress you about other things. I'm going to take a really wide remit today. There's probably a whole lot of people in this room who know a lot more about biosecurity than I do. So bear with me. We live in an incredible country, don't we? It's amazing. And I'm going to bore you with a few depressing stats shortly. But before I do, let's have a look at this. So this is a global picture. This is a picture of CO2 emissions. We're just working currently with a really wonderful man who's doing these animations, so I like playing with them. Now, if you're sitting in New Zealand, you kind of start to go, oh, holy shit. And you might have heard the headline recently, last week in fact, that we're now at the highest level of CO2 emissions in human history, 415 parts per million. Those of you in the audience, some of you will know what that means. For others, just to put it into context, a Russian city in the Arctic Ocean on Saturday had a high of 29 degrees. Average temperatures around this time of year is 12 degrees. So you don't really have to be a scientist to know that that's not good news. Johan Rockström, who we're currently doing some work with, he's the lead author of Planetary Boundaries, says that with the development of science, and thank you to those in the room who are in that field, and our understanding of the biophysical systems, we are the first generation to know that we face unprecedented global environmental risk. He also says we're possibly the last generation that has a chance to do something about it. The next decade matters. So let me bring you a little closer to home. So I know all of you have read our environmental Aotearoa report. I heard somebody talk about it earlier today. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, well, I'll give you a taster for those that haven't. I know there's only one or two. This is a taster of the fishing activity around New Zealand from 2012 to 2016. It's actual trip data from fishing vessels. Maybe we can levy them for some of your marine activity. So the activity shows the bright spots and it moves around. There's good news in that the pressures that we see from fishing, and commercial trawling in particular, have reduced in the last decade. And most of our fish stocks are currently being considered fished in a sustainable way within safe limits. What you can't see, of course, is the 5,000 seabirds killed by fishing operations in New Zealand in 2014. This includes high-risk species, endemic species that only breed in New Zealand. NIWA also have done some work recently that shows that there's little evidence that marine habitats are recovering even 15 years later after bottom trawling has ceased. So just moving a little bit on to freshwater, which is always a great topic to move us to. So this shows E. coli only, so the effect of E. coli and the effect in waterways in New Zealand. So it doesn't show our other attributes into waterways. The picture of New Zealand, the red obviously is red for stop. Red means that those are too dangerous to swim in. This is the North Island, just to give you a little bit more close-up. In our farmed areas across New Zealand, 80% of our river lengths are not swimmable. In our urban areas, it's 90%. So remember, that's just E. coli, not the other attributes. You depressed yet? So go and read our report, Environmental Aotearoa 2019. What we do in that report is say, well, the top 9 issues for New Zealand, where nature is at. It's a really grim reading, and I found it quite a hard read myself, and we did the report. But I recommend you go and read it. The reason why I'm emphasising those stats is my crazy idea is that we need a completely paradigm shift in the way that we care and what we care for. This is from Kate Raworth, and this is the global picture that she put in front of a lot of people last week, which basically shows that as a globe, we are operating outside of safe boundaries. So the idea that we would have infinite resources that will continue to be there and our mokopuna will have the same sort of quality of life is really challenged, both globally and also by our own stats. So one of the other crazy ideas is that all these things are connected now. What we've found is that consumption patterns are changing. New malnutrition and food security and food poverty issues overseas is changing the conversation. The impact of climate change is going to impact those who are already in poverty. And this is the same for New Zealand as well. And as Mike Smith talked this morning, the link between our own people well-being and nature is there's a lot more research in that, and it's getting a lot stronger. At a government level, of course, speaking as Secretary of the Environment, there is systemic changes going on. So the Zero Carbon Bill gets introduced this week. That will set a framework that is different from what we've had before. There will be water quality regulations that will aim to lift the standards that we have and the bottom lines. The ICCC are coming out with their report on what happens with agriculture into the ETS. There's a big work program on waste, and we also have a big work program on the quality of life in our urban environments, given that 80% of us live there. So all of that's to say that it's probably not enough to think in one single issue anymore. We know for us as a ministry, the connection between issues is as important as the issues themselves. The connection between climate and water, the connections between urban development and water outcomes, for example, connections between health and well-being. So for us as a ministry, we can't think just in environmental issues anymore. We need to think about the economic impacts, we need to think about a cultural dimension, and we need to think about who's going to win and who's going to lose. What are the social outcomes of some of those? So this is a wee chart I drew up the other day, so it has no official DIM other than me putting it on a piece of paper. I came out of Treasury, so it's been quite a journey, personal journey for me, but crazy, I know. And what changed my thinking, Ruth Richardson asked me the other day, was really being confronted by New Zealand statistics. I was brought up by a father who took us out into nature all the time. Our connection was really strong. And being confronted and going around the country, as you all see, was really made me start to rethink our approach. So this chart basically shows you what I think is the crazy idea that actually we're starting to see both in New Zealand and overseas. You'll see at one end there's a free market thing. Is anybody in the room on the end? Okay, good, because we're going to offer you counselling afterwards. We were in that phase right through the 80s, right? The market will just sort it out. We're all rational men and we'll act rationally. That didn't do very well for nature, I'm telling you, and it didn't actually do well for groups of people who were left behind. And that's not the society that we want, is what is kind of coming through. Then we've gone through a phase of if there's a market failure, maybe some government will tip some money in. Then we're kind of moving into things like, no, we'll go from volume of agricultural products to value. We'll think about living standards. We'll do climate risks. Companies now saying the first thing their investors ask them is, what is their approach to climate risk? So that's kind of in the middle there. And my crazy thought is that's not where we stop, because we've got to change what we put first. All of that side, probably up until we get to Kate Raworth and Eleanor Ostrom and those sorts of people, is putting people first and the individual first. The proposition, as we see in our lovely examples from Māori, is there's another way where you put nature first. It's not the thing we do once we've got some money and we've made our money. You put that first. The first consideration is back to our land, back to nature. And if that means that our short-term profit goes down, then so be it, because we all want to be kaitiaki. So there is a place over here that New Zealand has an opportunity to be the best in the world at, but also, more importantly, to have responsibility back to nature. How do we do that without recolonising what is actually Māori knowledge? Is my crazy, ambitious idea. Because I think that there lies the way for a future New Zealand that we actually still want to live in, or we can still live in. And I know for myself, I've got 2 mokopuna, and it's really bloody important. I'm going to finish in a minute, so you can ask me questions, probably hard ones. A couple of weeks ago, we put our money where our mouth is and went up to Tūhoe, and because it's all very well to say we care about nature, and then every day we don't make the right decisions, right? Well, in the Ministry of Environment, we wanted to go into the bush with people who are working in the bush with Tūhoe to understand what it takes to put nature first. And Amanda's going to hate me because she really didn't want to do the rats. It wasn't really about the rats, but we got to walk alongside the trap lines with the young boys who are learning about bush law. And some of them talked about what was happening for their peers and how lucky they were. And it wasn't because they had a job. It was because they were learning and being out in the bush.
Morning, folks. First morning here in Te Uruwera, one of 2. Today we're getting out and about and just doing whatever we're asked to do, which will be great. Actually, really nice to be on somebody else's time and agenda and place, of course. Place is something very much yet to be explored. We drove here in the dark through winding roads, so looking forward to see how it all opens up in front of us today. Well, great day so far. Must say I wasn't expecting to handle a dead rat, but that I did. It's a good time checking all the traps with Chino. Good to understand a little bit more about his connection to Te Uruwera, what it means to him and to his family. It's good to hear that in the latest generation there's a lot of hope. Yesterday was a really special day. One conversation that will probably stick with me was one I had up on the ridgeline last night with Mike. And I said, Mike, as you wander through these forests, do you ever think about what it might have been for your ancestors to walk through these same places? And he said, yeah, I do. I think about that all the time. And especially when I see a big tree, I wonder if one of my ancestors might have stood by that tree as well. It was a simple reflection, but one full of wonder, and in it I gained really probably just a glimpse of how important it is to have a sense of connection to place and how that place connects you to your forebears and how that can give meaning and identity to your life in lots of ways.
My last thought for you. is the crazy idea that we might bring young people into the conversation. So we've done this recently with bringing them onto the stage of our release of our EA 2019 report, and it really changed the dynamic in the room. They asked the question, what are you going to do when you go home? And we all had to adult up. They also talked to me about, what do they do when their friends are angry? And I said, well, let's talk and turn it to action. So what's a crazy idea we could do where the voice of the youth are with us at the boardroom, in your senior leadership teams, when you go and see a minister, when you're off doing other things,